If I told you that this code could listen, would you believe me? Now, not just reading the data from a real sensor, but actually simulating it. Like imagine teaching Python to feel warmth. Now, today I'm going to be building a tiny system that's not only going to listen, but it's also going to react and talk back to us. This is going to be a part of our coding series, The Code That Listens. And today I'm going to be showing you guys something amazing. So stay tuned and don't go anywhere yet. I'll see you in a bit. Now, real sensors measure temperature or data values through hardware. But before you start touching wires, it helps to actually test the logic first through simulation. So instead of connecting a real temperature sensor now, I'm going to make Python pretend to be one. So the Python code will now be what is going to listen for the temperature values and is going to send those values over to the Flask dashboard. It will just be like we're giving the code a voice. So now let's start with the sensor. So the goal is to make something that behaves like a real device and not just spits out random numbers. So we have to ensure that our sensor actually creates values that are believable and not just random. So we're going to start with importing the tools we need. We're going to import random and then import time and then import request. Now the random module will be for simulating fluctuating values or random values for our temperature sensor. Our time module will allow us to control update intervals, and our request module will allow us to then send our data to the server. Now, after all of this, we're going to then create our URL. Now, this URL, which stands for Uniform Resource Locator, it's the endpoint that we're going to be sending our values through to Flask so that it can display it on our dashboard. Don't worry about the technical details, but I'm getting somewhere. Now, I then have an initial temperature of 25 degrees. Now, this initial temperature is going to be our baseline. We're going to start from here to gradually increase or decrease our temperature value. Now we want it that every few seconds our script should change the temperature value slightly between -1 and +1. So this will allow us to mimic natural temperature drift, like the way a sensor responds to air changes. And how do we do that? We're going to be making use of the random module here. So we're going to have a variable called change, and this variable is basically going to contain a random uniform number between -1 and 1. And then what are we going to do with this number? We're going to add that number, which is the change, to our initial temperature, and then the value we get from there is then going to become our new temperature, and that new temperature is going to be the value that we're going to send over to our Flask server to actually display on our dashboard. Then now we want to, after all of this, we have to make sure that our temperature values don't go too wild, like it doesn't start jumping up and down. So to stop that, we need to set boundaries. So we're going to set soft boundaries between 22 and 28 degrees. So we're going to say if the new temperature is less than 22, increase it a bit. If it is higher than 28, then decrease it downward a bit. So we can also even still change its value. We can say that if it is less than 23, increase it a bit, and if it is greater than let's say 26, then decrease it down a bit, just to simulate a casual room temperature kind of system. Now next, we're then going to print this value to our console just so that we can see what's actually going on. And then we have our code block here. What this code block is going to do is that every 2 seconds, but we use our time module to make our code take a break every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, this particular code block will send new temperature values to our Flask app using a simple post request. So just think of this as the sensor talking to the server. Now let's set up our Flask app, and then we're going to print our readings to confirm what is actually going on. So if we come over to our Flask app, some things also have to be in place. There are some tools we need. So we're going to import our Flask, we're going to import request, we're going to import JSONify and render template. And then after we do all of that, as I said, not to bore you with the technical details, we're going to initialize our Flask app. After we initialize our Flask app, then we're going to store the latest temperature received from our sensor in a global variable called latest temperature. And then using that latest temperature, we're going to then create a data endpoint. Now, if you remember in our sensor app, I told you about this URL. Now, this URL is what we're going to be posting the data, that is our temperature values to. And in order for this URL to receive those values, we have to have the route defined in our Flask. So we have defined our data route, we have given it the post method request, and then we're going to have our Python decorator. And then what this whole code is doing is that basically when our sensor sends our values, the data endpoint, which is Flask, will then capture those values, and then it will respond with a confirmation saying, oh, we have received these values, and it will return success, that the values were received successfully. Now, the next route will now be our dashboard route. Now, this our dashboard route will be what will display the values on our HTML template. So it will show the current temperature using a simple HTML template, nothing fancy, just for better clarity. So, and now if we come to our HTML template, you'll see we already have this defined. We have our browser refresher, and then we're using our Jinga templating engine. And then all this line of code is just saying is that based on certain conditions, if the temperature is higher than 25, or if it is lower than 25, or if it is lower than 24, then the colors will change respectively. So if our temperature is higher than 25, we'll have a red color, and if our temperature is lower than 24, we have a neutral color, else the temperature will be green. This will allow us to see how our code reacts to changes in the environment or simulated temperature changes. Now that we have set that, let's then run our code to see what actually goes on. So now when we now run this and we run our sensor, and the sensor starts sending the data, Flask will then print those incoming values and update the page live. Let me just show you what's going to happen. So I'm going to run this. Now, after I've run this, it's going to give us our URL. So we're going to copy this. Now let me minimize the terminal. Then I'm going to come over to our sensor, and then I'm going to run our sensor. And you see our sensor will start sending us those values. So it's going to start saying server response status is a success, meaning that our Flask server has successfully received our data. And now, if we then come back to our app, let's take the URL we got. I'm going to come to Chrome. I'm going to zoom in a bit for you guys to see. Now, if I then paste the URL here, and let's see what we have. And then you can see that our Flask dashboard is actually simulating real-time temperature values, and it will be changing the colors based on the temperature value received. Now, this may look simple, but it is the foundation of any IoT system. The same principle connects smart thermostats, smart lighting, smart heating, weather station, or even data centers. The difference is we are seeing it stripped down to its most human form, to its most natural form, to its most basic form. So this is showing us that our code can actually listen. Now, this may be something simple, but in coming videos, I'm going to be taking you through real sensors and how the actual hardware interacts with our code. Now, today, our system didn't really sense heat, but it understood change. It noticed, it reacted, and it communicated. That is where true intelligence begins. Now, in soon time, we'll be connecting real sensors, and we're going to allow the code to feel the world for itself. And that is not something you want to miss out on. So that will be all for today's video. In our upcoming video, I'm going to I'm going to be preparing a lot of interesting things for you guys. So make sure you don't miss an episode. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys when I see you. I lost myself there.